The arrival of the unseen threat. The Emerges Empire had ruled this sector of space for centuries. Their fleets were unmatched, their armies vast, their power unquestioned. Their war with the Vakar Dominion had raged for over 50 years, a conflict of destruction and bloodshed across countless worlds. Today, another battle was underway, a brutal clash in the Centra system, where both sides had gathered their mightiest warships. The sky above the burning planet of Centra 4 was filled with fire. Thousands of ships filled the battlefield, exchanging powerful energy blasts. The Emerges Empire's dreadnoughts launched devastating salvos, their massive cannons tearing through enemy lines. The Vakar war beasts, biological ships covered in thick armor, roared through space, unleashing deadly plasma storms. Neither side would back down. Admiral Corvin of the Emerges Empire stood tall on the command deck of the battleship Iron Fist. His golden uniform reflected the glow of distant explosions. His face remained calm, but his mind calculated every movement of the enemy. "We push forward," he ordered. "Destroy their command ship. This war ends today." His officers nodded, confident in victory. Then, the alarms began to scream. "Unidentified object detected," one of the bridge officers shouted. Corvin turned sharply. "What object?" "Another Vakar fleet." "No, Admiral," the officer's voice was shaky. "It's something else." A single ship had appeared at the edge of the battlefield. It was unlike anything ever recorded. Dark, smooth, and impossibly fast. It was not Vakar. It was not Emerges. It was unknown. It moved forward, undeterred by the chaos around it. Corvin narrowed his eyes. "Open a channel. Demand identification." The comms officer tried. No response. The ship continued its silent advance, ignoring all hails. The Vakar, too, had noticed the newcomer. Both sides paused, weapons still charged, but now focused on the mysterious vessel. Who was it? What did it want? Then, the scanners finally identified the ship. Designation: TLUS Indomitable. Origin: human. Corvin's blood ran cold. Human. That was impossible. The Galactic records had very little about humans. They were a minor species, barely stepping beyond their own solar system. Their technology was primitive. They had no fleets, no influence. So why was one of their warships here, in the middle of the greatest battle of the war? Corvin turned to his second-in-command, Commander Veckrel. "How did they get here? How did we not detect them sooner?" Veckrel looked equally disturbed. "I don't know, Admiral." The ship appeared out of nowhere. Corvin clenched his fists. That was impossible. No ship could avoid their deep space sensors. No ship could jump this close to a battlefield without being detected. And yet, this human warship had done it. Suddenly, the ship broadcasted a message. A deep, steady voice echoed across all frequencies. "This is the Terran warship Indomitable. The war ends now." A silence fell over the battlefield. The Vakar commanders hesitated. The Emerges Empire fleet stalled. Then, the ship fired. A single precise energy beam shot across space. It moved faster than any known weapon, piercing through one of the largest Vakar war beasts. The creature's massive body trembled. Then, it exploded. Not just a normal explosion, a chain reaction. The war beast's energy core destabilized, creating a wave of destruction that wiped out an entire formation of Vakar ships. The battlefield was in shock. No weapon should be that powerful. No ship should be that fast. Corvin's breath caught in his throat. What was this ship? The Vakar panicked. They fired everything they had at the human warship. Missiles, plasma bursts, disruptor beams. Not a single shot hit. The Indomitable moved like a ghost, dodging every attack with terrifying precision. "This isn't possible," Veckrel whispered. "No species should have this level of technology." Corvin gritted his teeth. "It seems humanity does." The war had just changed forever. The galactic powers react. The battlefield remained frozen in shock. The Vakar Dominion and the Emerges Empire, two of the most powerful factions in the galaxy, had spent centuries developing warships capable of planetary destruction. They had faced countless enemies, conquered worlds, and survived against the most fearsome threats. But this was something new. Admiral Corvin gripped the command console, his mind racing. The humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be primitive. Yet here was a single Terran warship, outmaneuvering an entire fleet, wiping out enemy ships with unbelievable accuracy. And worst of all, it wasn't even struggling. On the other side of the battlefield, the Vakar fleet was in full panic. This ship, it should not exist, growled Warlord Karath, the commander of the Vakar forces. His species was bred for war, their ships designed to crush enemies under sheer brute force. And yet, their strongest vessel had been destroyed in seconds. "Focus fire on the Terran vessel," Karath roared. "Do not hold back." Hundreds of Vakar warships unleashed their firepower. Massive plasma cannons ignited space with green and blue energy, missiles streaked across the void, and disruptor beams surged forward, all locking onto Indomitable. For the first time, Corvin and his crew watched with keen interest. Would this human ship finally be overwhelmed? But then, the impossible happened. The Indomitable didn't block the attacks. It didn't absorb them with shields. It vanished. Gasps filled the Emerges warship's command deck. "What?" Corvin's voice was sharp. "Where did it go?" Scanners showed nothing. Not even a trace of energy. No ship, no movement. As if the warship had never existed at all. For a moment, the battlefield went eerily silent. Then, an explosion rocked the Vakar fleet from behind. The Indomitable had reappeared behind their formation, its cannons already ripping through the enemy lines with pinpoint precision. How did it move so fast? Veckrel whispered in horror. Corvin clenched his fists. This wasn't speed. This was something else. The ship's technology was beyond anything in the Galactic database. No known species had the ability to move this way. Not even the ancients. And worst of all, this was just one ship. If the humans had more, if this was just a scout, then the galaxy was in more danger than anyone had realized. The Vakar fleet was collapsing. Their strongest battleships were reduced to burning wreckage, their forces breaking apart in chaos. Some ships attempted to flee, but the Indomitable hunted them down effortlessly, its weapons striking with terrifying accuracy. At that moment, Corvin made his decision. This battle was already over. The Emerges Empire had no stake in the war with humanity. They had only fought the Vakar for territory. Now, there was something far greater at play. "Commander Veckrel," Corvin said, his voice cold and decisive. "Order all ships to cease fire." Veckrel hesitated. "Admiral, we..." Now, with a single command, the Emerges fleet powered down their weapons and pulled back. The Vakar warlord, still desperate for victory, sent a message across the battlefield. "Emerges cowards. Fight. We can still destroy them together." Corvin did not reply. He only watched. Watched as the Vakar's last warships were torn apart. Watched as the Indomitable hovered over the battlefield, untouched, unchallenged. Then, through the open comm channels, the human captain's voice echoed once more. "Humanity is here. Stand down or be destroyed." The galaxy had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed humans were weak. Now, they knew the truth, and they were not ready. "The galactic powers react," continued. The silence across the battlefield was suffocating. The Emerges Empire's fleet, once mighty and proud, now stood motionless. Their weapons were cold, their engines powered down. The Vakar Dominion's fleet, once confident in their brute strength, was in ruins, their greatest warships reduced to burning wreckage floating in the void. And at the center of it all, the Terran warship Indomitable. Admiral Corvin exhaled slowly, trying to steady his thoughts. This battle had changed everything. It wasn't just about the Vakar Dominion versus the Emerges Empire anymore. It wasn't about territory or conquest. It was about a new player on the board, a human warship that had just proven, in mere minutes, that it was stronger, faster, and more advanced than anything in the known galaxy. Corvin glanced at his second-in-command, Commander Veckrel. The officer's expression was grim, his scales slightly pale, a rare sign of fear among the Emerges elite. What should we do, Admiral? Veckrel asked hesitantly. Should we hail them? Corvin considered it. Every part of him wanted to understand what they had just witnessed. How had the humans built such a vessel? How did they move like that? How did they disappear from scanners and reappear at will? But his instincts screamed one thing above all: do not provoke them. Before he could answer, the Indomitable moved again. It did not retreat. It did not attack. Instead, it turned toward the Emerges fleet. Corvin felt his heart tighten. Every officer on the bridge stood frozen, watching as the Terran warship approached their battle line. Veckrel swallowed hard. Are they coming for us? Hold position, Corvin said, forcing his voice to remain calm. Do not fire. Do not move. But inside, a terrible thought crept into his mind. If this one ship decides to attack us, can we even stop it? The Indomitable came closer. Its dark, sleek hull reflected the dying light of burning warships, its strange, advanced energy field pulsing softly like a sleeping giant. Then, another transmission came through. The same deep, steady voice as before. Emerges Empire. Your fleet is still intact. Your forces remain unharmed. You have a choice. Leave this war, or share the fate of the Vakar. A simple message, a cold warning. Veckrel's claws tightened against the console. Admiral, if we refuse. Corvin didn't answer immediately, because he already knew the answer. If they refused, they would be wiped out. The Vakar had chosen to fight, and their fleets were nothing but debris now. This was not a negotiation. It was a test to see if the Emerges Empire was smart enough to accept reality. Slowly, carefully, Corvin stepped forward and issued his final command. All ships, pull back. Veckrel looked at him in shock. We're retreating. Corvin's eyes remained locked on the Indomitable, still waiting silently in front of them, watching. This isn't retreat, he said quietly. This is survival. And so, the Emerges fleet turned away from the battlefield, their engines flaring to life as they moved away from the wreckage of war. They left the Vakar behind, left their century-long conflict in the past, because the war was no longer theirs to fight. As the Emerges ships warped out of the system, Admiral Corvin gave one last look at the Terran warship, its dark silhouette standing alone in the void. A single human ship had just changed the course of history, and the galaxy was not ready. The power of a human warship. The Xenthra battlefield was now a graveyard of shattered warships. What had once been a brutal war between the Vakar Dominion and the Emerges Empire had ended in a way no one could have predicted. Not with diplomacy, not with victory from either side, but with the arrival of a single Terran warship. And now, only two things remained: the burning wreckage of the Vakar fleet and the Indomitable, a weapon unlike any other. Deep within the Vakar command ship, Warlord Karath lay injured, his reptilian body slumped against the shattered remains of his throne. His flagship was barely holding together, alarms blaring as power flickered across the failing systems. He coughed up dark blood, his vision hazy from the pain. His fleet, his entire war armada, had been annihilated in minutes, and now they were coming for him. His command crew was either dead or fleeing in escape pods. But Karath, he refused to run. Not that it mattered, because the Indomitable was here. Outside the viewport, the dark silhouette of the human warship loomed closer. It did not fire. It did not speak. It only hovered over the battlefield like a predator watching its prey. Karath's hands trembled. His mind raced. How? How had this happened? The Vakar Dominion was one of the strongest empires in the galaxy. They had conquered worlds, crushed rebellions, slaughtered weaker species without hesitation. And yet, one single Terran ship had brought them to their knees. He reached for the emergency comms panel, his claws shaking as he opened a transmission. "This is Warlord Karath of the Vakar Dominion." His voice was weak, but he forced himself to speak. "Human vessel, you have proven your strength. What do you want?" For a moment, there was silence. Then, a voice replied, calm, unwavering, absolute. "Surrender." Karath let out a bitter, broken laugh. Surrender. The Vakar had never surrendered to anyone. Not in thousands of years. Not to the Emerges Empire. Not to the ancient empires of old. And yet, as he looked at the Indomitable, at the destruction it had wrought with effortless precision, for the first time in his life, he felt true fear. His claws clenched into fists. He had no fleet left. No allies. No reinforcements. His empire was gone. And so, with a slow exhale, he lowered his head in defeat. "I surrender," he whispered. Across the battlefield, the last remaining Vakar ships received the transmission. Those who could still move powered down their weapons. Those who had once fought with pride submitted. The war was over. A message to the galaxy. Inside the Indomitable, Captain Elias Carter watched the scene unfold from his command chair. His hands remained steady, his expression calm. This was not unexpected. His crew was silent. None of them cheered, none of them celebrated. This was not a victory for glory. This was a lesson. A lesson for the galaxy. "Send the transmission," Carter ordered. His communications officer, Lieutenant Harlow, nodded and pressed a button. Across every known galactic frequency, the Terran message was broadcast. A deep, calm voice echoed across space. "The war is over. The Vakar Dominion has fallen. The Emerges Empire has retreated. Humanity does not seek war. But if we are threatened, we will respond. Consider this your only warning." The message was heard by every empire, every colony, every faction across the stars. The galaxy had never paid attention to humanity before. Now, they had no choice. The fear of the unknown. In the high councils of distant empires, rulers, warlords, and diplomats gathered in fear. The Galactic Coalition, the HFY Confederacy, the Zelthor Imperium, all once considered themselves the true powers of the universe. They had believed humanity was weak, irrelevant, nothing more than a primitive species barely worthy of notice. Now, a single human warship had crushed one of the mightiest fleets in history, and no one knew how many more existed. Had they just seen the first and only? Or was the Indomitable merely a scout? Whispers spread. Governments scrambled. Should they attempt diplomacy? Or should they prepare for war? The problem was, how do you fight something that is stronger, faster, and more advanced than anything you've ever known? The galaxy had no answer. And that was the greatest fear of all. Final thoughts. The balance of power has shifted. As the Indomitable turned away from the battlefield, its engines flaring as it prepared to leave, Captain Carter gave one final order. "Set course for the next system." The crew nodded, carrying out the command with silent efficiency. Humanity had made its move. The galaxy had been warned. And now, it was time to see who was smart enough to listen. A desperate gamble. The Indomitable was gone. The Battle of Zenthra had ended in complete devastation for the Vakar Dominion, and the Emerges Empire had withdrawn without a fight. Across the galaxy, news of the human warship's impossible victory spread like wildfire. Some rulers dismissed it as exaggeration. Others feared it was only the beginning. And a few began plotting. The galaxy could not afford to wait and see what humanity would do next. They had to act first. The Council of War, deep in the heart of the galactic core, inside the towering halls of the HFY Confederacy, an emergency war council had been called. Gathered around a massive circular table were representatives from 12 of the most powerful empires in the known universe. Some of them had been enemies for centuries. Now, they shared a common fear. At the head of the table stood Chancellor Vorthax, a cold, calculating leader with obsidian black eyes and a mind sharper than any blade. His people, the HFY, had ruled the galactic economy for generations. But even their vast intelligence networks had no answers for the Indomitable. He slammed a clawed hand against the table. "This Terran ship cannot be the only one," he hissed. "If humanity has an entire fleet of warships like this, they could challenge all of us." A Zelthor Imperium general spoke next, his voice dripping with contempt. "They destroyed the Vakar in minutes. If they decide to turn their weapons on us, we may not have time to respond." A murmuring spread across the chamber. The independent warlords, the trade syndicates, the military elites, all of them had spent their lives believing humanity was insignificant. Now, a single ship had proven them wrong. "Then we must act," Vorthax declared. His dark gaze swept across the council. "The longer we wait, the more time the humans have to grow stronger. We cannot allow this." A silence followed. Then a voice, hesitant but firm, spoke from the shadows. "What do you propose, Chancellor?" Vorthax smiled. "A preemptive strike." Gasps filled the chamber. Some of the leaders recoiled in shock, while others nodded slowly, considering the possibility. "We cannot attack humanity directly," a diplomat from the Trelveni Syndicate warned. "Their home system is too far, and we don't know how many of these warships they have." Vorthax tapped his fingers against the table, his expression unreadable. "Then we do not attack Earth." He leaned forward. "We trap the Indomitable. The bait is set." The plan was simple, but dangerous. The Galactic Coalition, along with several independent warlords, agreed to lure the Indomitable into a trap. A distress signal would be staged from a neutral colony, claiming that a powerful war criminal was hiding there. The message would be encrypted with Terran translation protocols, a clear bait for human intervention. If the Indomitable took the bait and entered the system, they would spring the trap. A combined fleet of over 500 warships from multiple factions would be waiting, ready to overwhelm the human ship with sheer numbers. The fleet would jam its mysterious warp system, cut off its communications, and destroy it before it could escape. "This is our only chance," Vorthax said coldly. "If we do nothing, we may find ourselves kneeling before a new galactic ruler." None of the leaders liked the plan, but they were more afraid of what would happen if they did nothing. The trap was set. Now, they'd waited. Indomitable takes the bait. A few days later, deep in uncharted space, the bridge of the Indomitable was calm. Captain Elias Carter leaned back in his chair, scanning the incoming reports. The galaxy had gone silent since their battle at Centra, too silent. It was as if the empires were waiting, planning something. "Sir," Lieutenant Harlow called from the comm station, breaking the silence. "We're picking up a distress signal." Carter arched an eyebrow. "Source." Harlow's fingers danced across the console. "A neutral colony on the edge of the HFY border. Message says they've identified a wanted war criminal, someone responsible for multiple planetary massacres. They're requesting help to capture him before local warlords arrive." Carter frowned. Something about this didn't feel right. He glanced at his tactical officer, Commander June Vasquez. "Thoughts?" She narrowed her eyes. "It's too convenient. The way this message is structured. It's designed for us to intercept it." Carter nodded slowly. He could feel it too. A trap. But then again, that didn't mean it wasn't worth sprinting. The best way to expose an enemy's true intentions was to let them think their plan was working. Carter turned toward the bridge crew. "Set course for the colony." Vasquez gave him a sharp look. "You sure, sir?" A slow, confident smile crossed Carter's face. "They think they can trap us?" His voice was calm, but held an edge of amusement. "Let's show them what happens when you corner a Terran warship. The battle begins. The Indomitable dropped out of warp above the colony. Instantly, the trap was sprung. Hundreds of warships decloaked, surrounding the human vessel from all sides. Destroyers, dreadnoughts, and planetary siege carriers formed an unbreakable ring of death around the Indomitable. A voice boomed over the comms. "This is High Admiral Livek of the Galactic Coalition. You are surrounded. Power down your weapons and surrender immediately." On the bridge of the Indomitable, Carter stared at the massive fleet surrounding them. His crew remained calm. This was exactly what they had expected. He leaned forward in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Surrender," he echoed, his voice almost amused. He turned to his weapons officer. "Lock on to the nearest command ship." The officer grinned. "With pleasure, Captain." Carter activated the comms. "I'll give you one chance," he said coldly. "Stand down, or you'll learn why the Vakar didn't live to tell their story." Admiral Livek hesitated. He had expected the humans to negotiate. He had expected them to be afraid. But instead, they were ready. A terrible realization hit him. We didn't trap the Indomitable. It trapped us. And then, the first shot was fired. The ultimate showdown. The trap had been set. The Indomitable was surrounded. Over 500 warships from various factions. Sarkai dreadnoughts, Zelthor battlecruisers, Trolvani interceptors, and warlord-led mercenary fleets had gathered for one reason: to destroy humanity's warship before it was too late. They had expected the Indomitable to panic. They had expected a desperate surrender. Instead, Captain Elias Carter's voice had come over the open comms with cold confidence. "Stand down, or you'll learn why the Vakar didn't live to tell their story." The Galactic Coalition fleet hesitated. And in that moment, the Indomitable struck first. The first strike. In an instant, the entire battlefield changed. The Indomitable moved. Not in the slow, calculated way of a traditional warship, but with impossible speed, a blur of dark metal against the backdrop of space. Before Admiral Livek could even issue a command, the Indomitable's primary cannons fired. A single, focused energy beam cut through space like a blade, piercing straight through the Coalition's nearest command ship. The massive Karkay dreadnought didn't just explode, it ruptured, detonating in a chain reaction that sent shockwaves through the fleet. It just wiped out a HFY ship. What kind of weapon was that? Regroup, or Ejor. Before the order could even be finished, the Indomitable vanished. One moment, it was there, and the next, it had disappeared from all sensors. The chaos of battle. Admiral Livek's claws dug into the console. Where did it go? Find it. Scanners swept the battlefield, but there was nothing. Then suddenly, another explosion. The Indomitable had reappeared behind the enemy fleet, striking from the rear. With surgical precision, it unleashed a volley of kinetic projectiles. Solid slugs fired at relativistic speeds. Even ships with the strongest energy shields were ripped apart as if they were made of paper. Admiral Livek watched in horror as entire squadrons vanished from existence in seconds. This isn't a warship," one of his officers whispered. "It's a monster." Livek gritted his teeth. Enough. The Galactic Coalition fleet finally responded with overwhelming force. Hundreds of warships unleashed their firepower, filling space with plasma bolts, missile swarms, and energy disruptors. No ship, not even the Indomitable, should be able to survive such an onslaught. But then, the Terran warship did the impossible. Technology beyond understanding. The Indomitable didn't just dodge. It anticipated. Every shot, every missile, every attack was avoided before it was even fired. It was as if the ship knew what the enemy was going to do before they did. "It's reading our movements," a Zelthor tactician shouted. "It's one step ahead of everything we do." Admiral Livek's eyes widened. How? No species, not even the most advanced eye-controlled fleets in the galaxy, could react with such perfect precision. This isn't just a ship, Yvek whispered. "It's an executioner." The turning point. The battle raged on, but there was no longer any doubt. For every Terran shot fired, an enemy warship was destroyed. For every enemy attack launched, the Indomitable was already gone. The Galactic Coalition fleet, once confident in their numbers, was being torn apart, one ship at a time. And then it happened. The Indomitable's primary weapons began to charge again. The massive cannon glowed with an eerie blue light, preparing for one final decisive strike. Admiral Yvek froze. He knew what was coming, and for the first time in his long military career, he felt true terror. "Fall back," he whispered. Then, louder. "All ships, fall back. Retreat, no." But it was too late. The Indomitable fired. A single beam of concentrated energy tore through space, slicing through the heart of the enemy fleet. The explosion that followed was blinding. Hundreds of warships were vaporized instantly. The battlefield became a graveyard of twisted metal, burning wreckage, and silence. The Galactic Coalition fleet had been annihilated. And the Indomitable, it was untouched. A message to the survivors. On what remained of the Coalition flagship, Admiral Yvek sat frozen in shock. Everything he had believed about warfare had just been proven wrong. His fleet, one of the strongest armadas in the galaxy, had been wiped out in less than an hour. The Indomitable hovered in the debris field, unscathed, unchallenged, and unstoppable. Then the human captain's voice echoed across the ruined battlefield. "This is Captain Elias Carter of the Terran warship Indomitable. Your leaders tried to trap us. They tried to destroy us before understanding who we are." A pause. Then, his voice hardened. "Let this be a lesson to all of you. We are not conquerors. We are not tyrants. But we are not prey." His next words sent a chill across the surviving fleets. "If you come for us again, there will be nothing left to bury." With that, the Indomitable's engines flared to life. And like a shadow slipping through the void, it vanished. Aftermath. The galaxy trembles. The remnants of the Galactic Coalition fleet limped home, carrying only one message. Humanity was no longer just another species in the stars. They were something else, something unstoppable. And now, the entire galaxy knew it. The surrender and the warning. The Galactic Coalition fleet was gone. What had started as a carefully planned trap had ended in total annihilation. Hundreds of warships destroyed. Thousands of trained soldiers dead. The Indomitable had proven beyond any doubt that humanity was not to be underestimated. And now, the survivors had a choice. Surrender or be erased. The moment of defeat. Admiral Yvek sat in his ruined command chair, his eyes staring blankly at the wreckage floating outside his shattered viewport. Silence filled the bridge. Not a silence of peace, but the silence of defeat. They had thought they were the hunters, but they had been the prey all along. A crackling sound interrupted his thoughts. The emergency communication channel had been activated. And then, the voice of Captain Elias Carter echoed through what remained of the fleet. "This is Captain Carter of the Terran warship Indomitable. Your fleet is in ruins. Your leaders gambled and lost." His voice was calm, unshaken, absolute. Yvek swallowed hard. His fleet had been the pride of the Coalition. They had fought in 100 battles, crushed a dozen rebellions, conquered entire star systems. And yet, a single Terran warship had destroyed them all. The realization settled into his bones like ice. They had never stood a chance. Then, Carter spoke again. "You have one option left. Surrender, or we end this." The meaning was clear, not just for the fleet, for the entire Galactic Coalition. The transmission that shook the stars. Across the galaxy, the surviving admirals and warlords had no choice but to comply. The surrender message was transmitted across all known frequencies, spreading faster than any fleet could travel. Billions of beings across the stars heard the words they had never expected to hear. The most powerful fleet in the galaxy had fallen to humanity. The great empires, the warlords, the ruling elite, all of them now feared one thing: the Terrans. And what was worse, they didn't even know how many more warships like the Indomitable existed. Had they just fought a scout? Or was this only the beginning? A meeting of fearful leaders. Within days, the galactic superpowers gathered in secret. The HFY Confederacy, the Zelthor Imperium, the Trelvani Syndicate, and even the remaining warlords from the Galactic Coalition, all of them sat in the same room for one reason only: to discuss how to deal with humanity. Chancellor Vorthax, his voice filled with barely concealed fear, spoke first. This cannot continue. The Terrans, they are beyond anything we have ever encountered. The Zelthor Imperium general slammed a fist onto the table. We should prepare for war. We cannot allow a single species to hold such power over the galaxy. A cold silence followed. Then, a quiet voice spoke from the corner of the room. "If we fight them again," said a Trelvani diplomat, his multiple eyes filled with unease, "we might not survive." The word sent a chill through the chamber, because everyone there knew it was true. The Terrans hadn't just won the battle. They had made it clear: challenge us again, and we will end you. For the first time in galactic history, the strongest powers in the universe faced a choice they had never considered before: war or fearful peace. Humanity's final warning. Back aboard the Indomitable, Captain Carter stood on the bridge, watching as the surviving ships limped away. He had seen defeat before, but never like this. Never had the galaxy been so afraid. Lieutenant Harlow turned to him. "Sir, incoming message from the Emerges Empire. They want to negotiate." Carter smirked. Of course they do. Humanity had just changed the balance of power. Now the galaxy had to decide how they would live in a universe where humanity was no longer weak. Would they accept peace? Or would they be foolish enough to try again? Either way, humanity was ready. And this time, the galaxy would never be the same. The legend of the Indomitable. The battle was over. The Indomitable had crushed the Galactic Coalition's fleet, forcing their surrender. The most powerful empires in the universe now knew the terrifying truth: humanity was no longer a minor species in the stars. They were something far greater. But while the war was won, its consequences were just beginning. Whispers across the galaxy. Across thousands of worlds, stories spread like wildfire. Tales of a single human warship, a vessel that had appeared from nowhere and shattered the strongest fleet ever assembled. At first, many refused to believe it. Surely, no single ship could have done such a thing. But then the broadcasts came. Recorded footage from the battle. Glimpses of the Indomitable moving faster than any known warship, dodging enemy fire before it was even fired, and obliterating entire formations with a single shot. And the final, chilling message from Captain Ilias Carter: "If you come for us again, there will be nothing left to bury." The words were etched into history. Some called the Indomitable a ghost ship. Others believed it was not even human, that it was some ancient, forgotten weapon, rediscovered by the Terrans. But one thing was clear: the galaxy would never be the same. A divided universe. The great empires, once confident in their superiority, now faced a terrifying question. Should they seek peace with humanity? Or should they prepare for a war they could not win? The HFY Confederacy, once arrogant in its control over trade routes, quietly began negotiating treaties with Earth, offering resources and technology in exchange for assurances of non-aggression. The Zelthor Imperium, the most warlike of the factions, began building secret weapons, desperate to find a way to counter human technology. And the Galactic Coalition, humiliated and broken, now stood in chaos, its leaders divided between seeking revenge or survival. For the first time in history, the greatest powers of the galaxy feared extinction. And humanity. They were watching. The Indomitable vanishes. In the weeks following the battle, the Indomitable disappeared. No empire, no intelligence network, no deep space scanners could find it. Some said it had returned to Terran space, hidden within the depths of a secret fleet of warships waiting for the next attack. Others claimed it was still out there, moving through the stars, unseen, ready to strike at anyone who dared threaten Earth. The uncertainty terrified the galactic elite. The mystery of the Indomitable was just as dangerous as the warship itself. Because now, every fleet commander, every emperor, every warlord had the same paralyzing fear. What if it returns? The message to Earth. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain Elias Carter stood before the holographic display, watching as encrypted messages from Earth streamed in. One transmission, marked highest priority, appeared before him. A message from the Terran High Command. He read the words carefully. Then, a slow smile crossed his face. He turned to his crew. "Prepare for our next mission." Commander June Vasquez raised an eyebrow. "Where to, sir?" Carter's eyes gleamed. "Let's remind the galaxy why they should be afraid." The Indomitable's engines roared to life, and in the blink of an eye, it was gone. The legacy of the Indomitable. For generations, the story of the Indomitable would be told across the stars. Some would fear it, some would seek it, but none would forget it, because the day the Indomitable entered the battlefield was the day the galaxy learned to fear humanity.
And helps me keep creating amazing content for you.